Last week, I gave Roy some homework, and he's done his homework. He's going to let us know the answer right after this.
I want to be your disability rep.
As you reminded me last week, as you reminded me this morning, I asked you a question last week, which is how has this whole new working from home phenomenon affected the disability process? Because to me it seems like the fact that you can work from home would make it less likely for someone to be able to potentially qualify for a disability because the opportunities maybe have opened up.
Yeah, and as you know, Will, a lot of times the inconsistencies in laws leads to clarity in policy, and that's kind of what happened here with this many, many years ago. Back in 1994, a gal named Carolyn Cleveland had filed for Social Security disability, and then she decided to go back to work, and she filed for an ADA, Americans Disability Act, accommodation at work, to which they promptly said, wait a minute, you're disabled. So with the ADA, you know, if your employer will make a reasonable accommodation to allow you to stay in the workforce, then they can make the reasonable accommodation. But in this case, they had said many years ago, you said you were totally, completely disabled, you couldn't work, you admitted to it because you filed for Social Security. And the case actually went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court came back and said, in kind of the fashion of the Supreme Court where they don't actually make a decision a lot of times, they said, oh no, there's no inconsistency here. And that was the ruling of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
But what kind of came out of that as far as Social Security goes is that if your employer is making an accommodation for you, they will look at whether you can go back to that job with that accommodation. So it's kind of like when we have a credit card, and it's kind of a long ways to go, but you have a credit card, you have access to $10,000, but you don't actually have $10,000, right? And so it's the same thing here, because you could ask for an accommodation doesn't mean that you actually had one, right? And so that's kind of the way this is shaken out.
Okay.
So if you work from home and your boss lets you go lay down throughout the day and lets you put up your feet and lets you do all these type of things, then that's an accommodation you'll have to work around. If you work from home and you do those things and your boss is none the wiser, you didn't actually receive the accommodation.
I see.
So where we get into trouble a lot of times is clients will go in and say, oh, well, they let me work from home and I was able to stay in my pajamas and I was able to do this and I was able to put up my feet and work on the couch. And maybe the employer was on board with that, maybe they weren't. But what's important for our clients is to realize that unless your employer specifically said you could do those things by way of an accommodation, they weren't truly an accommodation. And it will matter the way Social Security adjudicates your claim.
And that then, if it's not officially an accommodation, is a benefit to someone seeking disability?
It is.
Yeah.
And what's interesting when we talk about accommodations is a lot of times for legal purposes, employers don't want to admit to accommodations, right? If you have an employee that can't do all aspects of the job and they hurt somebody at work, then what's the attorneys in the world going to do?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
That's your fault. Yeah.
Yeah, you had a weakened employee or you had a less than full capacity employee that was doing whatever, XYZ, and now we're going to sue you because you made that poor choice.
Yeah, because it was a known, you knew it, and you proceeded with full knowledge, but ignoring the clear danger that you knew about, which makes you liable.
Where I worked before, we let people work from home for a while, and then when COVID came up, we all went and worked from home for about 2 years, actually. And there was great concern with our workman's comp insurance company about what home offices look like. Because, you know, you can't control tripping hazards, you can't control dogs or cats running around the house, you can't control lots of things in that environment any longer. and it become a real issue for us at one point in time.
Yeah, I can see that.
So you just kind of got to keep in mind, work at home should be like work in the office unless your employer specifically says it's something different.
All right. Well, if you got more questions about that or other topics in disability, you can contact Roy. He's available right on the phone, 417-882-1800. Get a hold of him. You got some office appointments available today?
I do. This is kind of a quiet week for me again, so just feel free to give us a shout, and we'll set aside some time. There's time every day I set aside to see new clients. It's real important to me to take that time.
Awesome. Well, it's a great day to do that. If you need anything, like I said, give him a call. Visit his website, yourdisabilityrep.com, and we'll see you next week with more disability.
I want to be your disability rep.